Hi, I'm Judy from Bungalow Quilting and Yarn, and I'm going to show you how to make beautiful scrap quilts with a 3.5, 4.5, and 5.5 inch template system. This is a system that was devised in helping people to make quilts that are true scrap quilts. Quilts that are made with strips and with new fat quarters aren't really scrap quilts at all, but they're just cutting up new pieces of fabric. This is designed for the quilter in mind who maybe was a garment sewer initially and has odd-shaped scraps, or makes bags, or you make drunkard's path quilts, and as a result you have pieces that are cut out that look like this, that have arcs in them. And also for people who do a lot of applique and maybe cut circles out of their fabrics and you have strange shaped pieces. So because they're hard acrylic, they're 3.5, 4.5, and 5.5 inches, you can lay the acrylic pieces anywhere on the fabric so that you don't have to worry about measuring, squaring up, or cutting measuring or squaring up at all. You just lay them in the spot that you want them and you can cut from there. No squaring up, no measuring. So the idea from this started out with my frustration of having a lot of scraps, piles of scraps, that were odd shaped because I was a garment sewer initially. So the idea did not originate with wanting to do something with these particular sizes. It just started out of a need. So the first thing I did with my unusually shaped scraps were cut 3.5 inch squares. So I cut a lot of the different pieces that I had into 3.5 inch squares. So you can see that these are the 3.5 inch squares. I like the crossroads pattern, so I included a center square out of contrasting piece and then cut 4 3.5 inch squares. Well, then after I had these all piled up, I thought to myself, I'm going to have to figure out how to make setting triangles. And the setting triangles require some math. And I didn't want to have to think about the math in regards to how the corner squares would be different from these setting squares. So I took a 4.5 inch square and I took a 5.5 inch square and I bisected both of those twice. And in doing that, I thought this will either work or it won't work. Well, these are quarters of the 4.5 inch square, and these are quarters of the 5.5 inch square. And not only did it work, but there's enough on the edges of the seam allowances where when you do make your 1/4 inch seam, your blocks will float and you won't be cutting off your points. So you didn't really follow the rules of quilting, which is adding 7/8 of an inch or adding 5/8 of an inch or whatever it is. You just cut out the 3.5 inch square, a 4.5 inch square, and a 5.5 inch square. You bisect those twice and apply them like that to make the crossroads pattern. So I had finished doing this, and once you finish doing something like this, if you have purchased a 3.5, 4.5, and 5.5 inch template on the market, if you purchase them independently, you're already up over $30. If you can even find a 5.5 inch acrylic template. 5.5 inch acrylic templates are not widely sold. You can find 5 inch acrylic templates, you can find 6 and 6.5, but 5.5 just aren't out there. So the second one I came up with after I did that first one was this one. And this you can see that you're using various scraps that are a multitude of colors and a multitude of lights and darks, where the 5.5 inch square is the base of the house. The 4.5 inch square is the roof of the house. It's a half of a 4.5 inch square. And the background is halves of the 3.5 inch square. And when you work with something like this, if you just pay attention to your lights and your darks, first and foremost, it's amazing what kinds of fabrics will actually go together. Different genres and different prints, whether they're traditional or contemporary, they seem to work in a pattern like this. So after I had the second one, this was the second one put together, I thought, boy, I must really be onto something. So I was going to continue to go on using a 3.5, 4.5, and a 5.5 inch template and see what else I could come up with. So the third one that I came up with is the one that I'm going to demo. And this is the one that in the book is called Treasure Box. Now every single quilt that I show you is going to be diagrammed very explicitly in the book in black and white. The black and white printing is to save money. You can look at the colored pictures on the website, which is www.bungalowquilting.com, and they're very clearly and simply explained how to do every single one of these blocks. So the third one, the one that I'm going to demonstrate, is the one that I call Treasure Box in the book. This again is done mostly by arranging your lights and your darks and probably sticking to 3 or 4 different colors in a colorway. So you can separate out your scraps by making a pile of 4 different colors and separating your lights and darks. This is a great quilt if you want to make a baby quilt for somebody, or a wedding gift for somebody, or a lap quilt or something for somebody, and you don't want to buy any new fabrics at all. You can accomplish that by doing this. How this one is done is you're going to take 2 lights and 2 darks. So here are my, once again, an odd-shaped scrap. And like I said, I challenge anybody to find any book on the market that teaches you how to do a scrap quilt using something other than strips or fat quarters. So here's 2 layers of light. Then you take 2 layers of a dark. I want to use this fish fabric for my 2 layers of a dark. Doesn't matter if they're right sides up, right sides together, wrong sides together. There's no squaring up, there's no measuring. There's just applying these acrylic templates in the spot that you need them to be, and then use your rotary cutter to cut around it. So I'm going to cut out a total of 4 5.5 inch squares. And that's 2 lights and 2 darks. Remove the scraps off to the side, and there's your pile of 2 lights and 2 darks. Then you're going to move the 5.5 inch template away. You're going to put your 3.5 inch template into the corner. You're going to have if your rotary blade is sharp, this will work very well. You cut right to that edge. Go over to this side, cut right to that edge, and move this away, move this apart. So now you have what looks like an L and a square. You're going to put your 5.5 inch template back again, like this, and you're going to cut that L. Then you're going to chain piece, because chain piecing also saves thread and it saves a lot of time. So here are your squares that you cut with the 3.5 inch square, and here are the bars that you cut when you cut the L apart. So you chain piece these small bars to one end of the square. Now there's absolutely no waste when you're doing this block. The only waste that there is that when you put these 2 together, there's a 1/4 inch seam here. And when you make that 1/4 inch seam, that shortens this up slightly, so that when you put the next bar here and you stitch it, you're going to have to trim that off right there on the end. But that's the only waste. Not only is that the only waste, but you're going to be using up scraps that you didn't know what you were going to do with. You're going to have them, whether you have them in a basket or in a bag somewhere, you're going to be using all of these scraps that you thought you were never going to use again. Now there's that basic block for the treasure box. Now if you would lay, like I did before, if you would lay 4 darks and 4 lights instead of just 2, you would get an hourglass configuration that would go throughout like a figure 8, which is also diagrammed in the book. The next one that you can do, the other one that you can do, is square and a square. A square and a square in and of itself is a nice block. So say you wanted to make an I Spy quilt, you could take this, because it's clear acrylic, you can lay it over a motif and fussy cut, you can see what you're cutting. This is the 5.5 inch square. These are 4.5 inch half squares all the way around. Once again, because you're not following the rules of cutting an extra 7/8 inch, you're not measuring at all, you're just cutting out your 5.5 inch and your 4.5 inch. You're floating your blocks because these are slightly longer than they technically should be, and you're not cutting off any points. So these are 4.5 inch half squares around the 5.5 inch square. These are 4.5 inch half squares around these 4.5 inch. So you can see there's 2 4.5 inch half squares joined here and here. Now watch what happens when you alternate, when you do the same block, and you alternate lights and darks. You get the fan blade appearance. And when you put those 2 together with that fan blade appearance, where you've altered their lights and your darks, every other block will then become a pinwheel block. And you've also got this tertiary design of the chain of diamonds in between your squares. So you have 3 different design elements going on in one block just from using 4.5 and 5.5 inch template squares. Another one that you can do is the broken dish block. This is using the 5.5 inch block, and these are 5.5 inch quarter squares. I squared it down then using the 4.5 inch block. I squared it down, and then I used another one, a 4.5 inch block in the center with a motif. Again, fussy cutting because you can see through the blocks. This is Sunshine and Shadows, or Jacob's Ladder, where you can see that there's a concentric ring pattern. This is a 5.5 inch half square. That's what these are. These are 5.5 inch half squares. When you cut those, you bisect them once. You have the 5.5 inch half square here, and then the other one you set aside. These are quarters of the 4.5 inch. Then you take the other one that belonged to this. You take these corners, bring them together, crease it, open it out, then on your other one you have a crease. You take the 3.5 inch square, lay the diagonal on that crease, cut here, and that's what creates that block. So once again, like I said, you are going to be using up scraps that you thought you had no use for, that are laying around. This little crown block can be used to make the cross and crown quilt. This is done very much the same as the treasure box one that I diagrammed or that I demoed for you. This unit is the same as this unit here in the treasure box. These are 5.5 inch quarter squares. These are 4.5 inch quarter squares. This square is just the same size as this. Once again, using lights and darks and using up scraps that you didn't think you were going to use. The last one is the one that's behind me. This is just your old-fashioned signature block or autograph block. This is a 5.5 inch square. You cut your 5.5 inch block. Once again, no measuring, no squaring up. Cut your 5.5, cut two contrasting 3.5 inch squares, lay them in the corners, sew on the diagonal, flip them out and press. That in and of itself is a nice block. If you're having a going away gift for somebody that you want to have everybody sign an autograph. But look what happens when you put 4 of those together. When you put 4 of those together, arranging your lights and your darks, you get the X's and O blocks. And these are made mostly out of garments or fabrics that were left over from garments that I made for my children when they were small. Pink dresses and different pinks and light colors. So you get the X's and O's. Here's by turning it this way, and then by turning the autograph block this way and this way. So there's the demonstration of the 3.5, 4.5, and 5.5 inch template. And if you want to purchase the 3.5, 4.5, and 5.5 inch template set with the book, it's sold for $18 from Bungalow Quilting and Yarn. So you just have to go to the website, www.bungalowquilting.com, contact me through the website, or call the Bungalow Quilting and Yarn in Ripon, Wisconsin. And like I said, if you purchase them individually, you're already over $30, but you get the template and the book for $18. So I hope to hear from you soon.